The grand ballroom of the celestial spire shimmered beneath a vaulted ceiling that displayed a holographic nebula. It was the annual gala of the Stellar Humanitarian Foundation, a gathering of Earth's elite, where wealth was worn as comfortably as the tailored suits and gowns. Conversations were a low hum of power deals and performative philanthropy, underscored by the bland, inoffensive melodies of a string quartet in the corner dot. At the center of a particularly smug circle stood a man of considerable fortune, his fortune built on mining asteroids. He held a crystal flute of champagne, his laughter a sharp, dismissive sound. His gaze drifted across the room, past the diplomats and magnates, and settled on the main stage. The quartet had finished. A young woman had taken their place at the cheetah grand piano, a polished obsidian instrument that seemed to swallow the light. She was perhaps 19, her dress simple and out of place among the silks and jewels. Her posture was straight, her hands resting in her lap as she looked out at the sea of indifferent faces. The millionaire's lip curled, a charitable gesture. "I suppose," he announced, his voice carrying farther than he intended, letting the scholarship student tickle the keys. "It adds a touch of authentic struggle to the evening." A few in his circle tittered, their eyes darting to the stage with newfound, condescending curiosity. The young woman on the stage showed no reaction. She simply adjusted the bench, her movements economical and calm. She placed her fingers on the keys, closed her eyes for a brief moment, and began. The first notes were soft, a simple, clear pattern that seemed to trace the fall of rain on a quiet world. It was pleasant, unassuming. The millionaire smirked, taking a sip. See? Charming in its simplicity. But the music did not stay simple. The left hand introduced a deep, resonant rhythm, a heartbeat from the core of a planet. The right hand began to weave a melody around it, a line of aching beauty that spiraled upward. It was no longer just a tune. It was a landscape. You could hear the wide, sun-drenched plains of an ancestral homeland, the whisper of tall grasses, the resilience of roots digging deep into hard earth. The conversations in the ballroom began to falter. A diplomat missed a word. A socialite's laugh died in her throat. The holographic nebula above seemed to pulse in time with a deepening bass. Then the harmony shifted. The melody encountered a dissonant chord, a clash that spoke of chains and stormy seas, of a painful journey across stars not by choice. The music wrestled with it, the beautiful theme straining against the discord. It was not angry. It was truthful. It was remembrance, woven into sound. The millionaire's champagne flute had stopped halfway to his lips. His smirk was gone, replaced by a faint line of confusion. This was not the simple background music he had expected. This was a story, and it was demanding to be heard. The young woman's hands moved with a fluid grace that was both powerful and delicate. She began to build the piece, layer upon layer. The rhythm section became more complex, incorporating syncopated patterns that felt ancient and futuristic all at once. The melody fractured and reformed, stronger each time. It spoke of generations, of wisdom passed down, of joy found in community, of a spirit that would not be broken. A soaring, triumphant line erupted, clear and bright as a trumpet call. It was the sound of overcoming. It was the sound of a dawn earned. Tears welled in the eyes of a hardened news magnate standing near the stage. An elderly ambassador who had served in wars and peace talks found his breath caught in his chest. The music was no longer just heard. It was felt in the bone dot. It reached a crescendo, a magnificent peak where all the themes, the ancestral plains, the struggle, the resilience, the joy merged into a single thunderous declaration of existence. Then, with immense control, she began the descent. The music softened, not into weakness, but into a profound, unwavering peace. The final notes were a series of gentle, resonant chords that hung in the air long after her hands had stilled, a benediction of quiet strength. Silence. It was absolute, a physical presence in the grand room. The holographic stars seemed to hold their light. For a long moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then, from the back of the room, a single person began to clap. Then another. It was not the polite applause that had greeted the quartet. It was a rising wave, thunderous, heartfelt, a release of collective emotion. People rose to their feet, their eyes shining. The ovation was a living thing, filling the space the music had vacated. The millionaire stood isolated in the midst of it. The sound of his own mocking words echoed in his mind, sounding small and hollow against the majesty he had just witnessed. He looked at his hands, one still holding the forgotten glass. He felt a strange hollowness in his own chest, a place where the music had resonated and found only an echo of his own pride. He watched as the young woman stood from the piano. She gave a small, gracious nod to the audience, her expression still calm, composed. There was no triumph in her face, no glare in his direction. There was only the quiet certainty of someone who had spoken her truth and been understood. As the applause finally began to subside, people started to move toward the stage, drawn to her. The millionaire turned and walked away from his silent circle. He moved through the crowd, not toward the exit, but toward a quiet balcony overlooking the city's glittering skyline. The cold night air was a shock. He set the champagne flute on the railing and looked out at the countless lights, each representing lives, stories, struggles, and beauty he would never know. He had built an empire measuring mineral wealth. He had laughed at what he perceived as a lack of polish, of sophistication. But her music had been a universe. It contained more history, more emotion, more raw human power than any balance sheet or asteroid yield. He had mocked a depth he was too shallow to perceive. He did not find redemption on that balcony. He did not have a sudden change of heart that erased his nature. But he felt a crack, a fissure in the certain wall of his worldview. He had been stunned, not just by the skill, but by the profound reality of it. The room had not been stunned by a performance. It had been humbled by a testament. Back inside, the gala had transformed. The conversations were lower, more genuine. People spoke of the music, of what it made them feel, remember, cherish. The young woman was surrounded, not by patrons condescending to compliment, but by people genuinely asking about her influences, her studies, her journey. The millionaire eventually returned to the ballroom. He did not approach her. He had nothing to say that would not sound foolish. He simply observed from a distance a man who had measured worth in tons of platinum and found it instead in 88. Black and white keys, played by hands that held a legacy he could never afford. The event concluded. The guests departed, carrying the memory of the music with them into the night. The young woman packed her sheet music, thanked the event coordinator, and stepped out into the cool air. She looked up at the real stars, not the holograms, and smiled a small, private smile. In his private limousine, gliding silently above the city, the millionaire sat in the dark. He instructed the driver to go home, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. He did not turn on the news screen. He just watched the city pass below, and, in the quiet hum of the engine, he could still hear, clear as a bell, the final peaceful chord. It was a sound that did not mock him. It simply was. And in its enduring resonance, he understood, for the first time, the true meaning of poverty. It had nothing to do with money at all.